John had always considered himself an ordinary man. He worked as a scientist, spent most of his days in his lab, and lived a quiet life. His friends often teased him for being too serious, but he didn't mind. The world outside seemed chaotic for him to enjoy. He was content in his little bubble of research and discovery. One evening, everything changed. John had just finished his work at the lab and was walking home. The streets were quiet, and the evening air was cool. As he walked through the park near his apartment, something strange caught his eye. There, in the shadows, stood a woman. Her appearance was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Tall, with dark skin that shimmered faintly in the light, her hair was a smooth cascade of silver that seemed to flow like liquid metal. But it wasn't just her looks that caught his attention, it was the way she moved, like a predator. She was completely silent, every step calculated. John froze, his heart racing. He didn't know why, but there was something about her that made him feel both afraid and strangely drawn to her. She wasn't like any woman he had ever met. The woman stepped closer. John tried to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, it felt like time stopped. Her eyes were the color of the deepest night, full of intensity and coldness. There was something fierce about her, something dangerous. John swallowed hard and took a step back, but she moved even closer, her gaze never leaving his. "Who are you?" John asked, his voice shaky. The woman didn't respond. Instead, she reached out, and John felt an icy chill run through his body as her hand brushed his arm. It wasn't just a touch, it felt like something more. Like she was scanning him, studying him. John felt exposed, vulnerable, and he couldn't understand why. He tried to move, to get away, but his legs felt frozen in place. The woman seemed to notice his discomfort and gave a slight smirk, though it wasn't warm. It was cold, distant, and full of something John couldn't place. "What do you want?" he managed to say, his voice now more steady, but there was still fear in his chest. The woman's expression softened for just a moment before she stepped back. John took a breath of relief, but then something happened. Her eyes flicked towards something behind him, and John's heart dropped into his stomach. Without a sound, she vanished. It was as if she had melted into the shadows, leaving John alone. In the park, still trembling, his mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Who was she? Why did she make him feel so weak? John didn't realize it at that moment, but this was only the beginning. The woman was not just any stranger. She was an assassin, an alien assassin sent to kill him. But something about him had caused her to hesitate. There was a connection, one she couldn't understand, one she couldn't ignore, and it was going to change everything. As John turned and hurried home, he couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't just encountered a strange woman. He had encountered something much more dangerous and somehow much more powerful. The question was, why had she left him alive, in the dark, hidden far from John's sight? The woman watched him from the shadows, her eyes still locked on him. She was supposed to kill him, but something was stopping her. Something about him was different, something that made her feel weak. The days after the encounter with the strange woman felt like a blur to John. He couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. It wasn't just her appearance that had left him shaken. It was the feeling, the way she had looked at him, almost like she was seeing right through him, examining his every thought and action. It was unsettling, but also strangely magnetic. John tried to ignore the unsettling feeling in his chest, telling himself it was just an odd encounter, nothing more. He went back to his normal routine, buried himself in his work, but the memory of the woman lingered. One evening, as he sat at his desk in the lab, he felt the air grow heavy. It was subtle at first, just a chill creeping up his spine, but it quickly grew stronger. He glanced around the room, his eyes scanning for anything unusual, but saw nothing. His heart began to race as a feeling of being watched washed over him. Then, the door creaked open. John froze, not sure what to expect. His mind raced, and he wondered if it was her, the woman from the park. Slowly, he stood up, his breath catching in his throat. The woman stepped into the lab, her presence as overwhelming as it had been that night. This time, there was no hesitation. She moved with purpose, her eyes never leaving his. What do you want from me?" John asked, his voice shaking despite his attempt to sound confident. The woman didn't speak at first. She stood just a few feet away, watching him, her intense gaze like a weight on his chest. John couldn't move. His body felt stiff, almost frozen, as if her presence alone was enough to immobilize him. "You're not afraid," she said finally, her voice low and smooth, almost soothing. It was a strange contrast to the dangerous energy she radiated. John swallowed hard. "Why should I be afraid? You're not going to hurt me, are you?" He tried to sound brave, but the words came out uncertain. His hands trembled at his sides. The assassin tilted her head slightly, studying him with a gaze that seemed to pierce through him. "You don't understand. I'm here to kill you?" John's heart dropped. What? Why? Does it matter?" she asked, her tone cold but not unkind. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning him once again. But this time, there was something different. A flicker of doubt, something John couldn't quite grasp, lingered in her eyes. He took a step back. "I don't understand. You're an assassin?" The woman didn't respond immediately, her focus shifting for a moment as if considering something. "Yes," she finally answered. "I was sent to eliminate you." John's head spun. "But why me? I'm nobody. I'm just a scientist." The woman hesitated, as if weighing her next words carefully. "It's not about who you are," she said. "It's about what you are. You have something that threatens the balance of power." John frowned, confused. "I don't have anything like that. I'm just trying to cure diseases, to make life better." The assassin's eyes softened, and for a moment, she almost seemed human. "Almost. You don't understand, but you will. They've been watching you for a long time, waiting for the right moment." John blinked, trying to process what she was saying. "Who's they?" Before the woman could respond, there was a noise from the hallway outside the lab. John's heart skipped a beat, and the assassin's sharp gaze shifted toward the door. She held up a finger to her lips, signaling for him to remain quiet. John's mind raced. Who else could be here? Was he in danger? But the assassin didn't wait to see. She moved with lightning speed to the door, her body a blur of motion. John barely had time to react before she was back in front of him. Blocking the doorway with a deadly grace, she looked at him once more. Her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and something else, something John couldn't identify. "Stay behind me," she ordered, her voice firm. Before John could speak, the door exploded open, and in rushed a group of armed men. They were dressed in black, their weapons raised. They didn't seem surprised to see the woman. In fact, they almost looked prepared for her. One of them stepped forward, a tall man with a scar running down his face. "Step aside, assassin," he growled. "He's coming with us." John's pulse raced. Who are these people? What was going on? The woman stood her ground. "No one is taking him," she said, her voice colder now, her entire posture shifting to one of complete authority. The men hesitated for a moment, their eyes narrowing. "You're not in charge here," the man with the scar spat. John felt the tension crackle in the air. The woman didn't move, her eyes locked onto the intruders, as if daring them to make the first move. John could see now that she wasn't just a killer, she was more than that. There was a purpose in her actions, a reason behind every move. "Who are you?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his heart still pounding in his chest. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she focused on the men in the doorway. "You will not touch him," she said firmly. And then, in the blink of an eye, the assassin moved. The air in the lab was thick with tension. John's heart raced in his chest as he stood behind the assassin, still trying to make sense of everything that was happening. The men in the doorway, dressed in black tactical gear, were clearly not here to talk. They were here for something, or someone, and John had no idea why they had come for him. The woman in front of him didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on the intruders, and for a brief moment, John noticed a flash of something in her gaze, anger, maybe, or determination. "Move aside, assassin," the man with the scar said, his voice cold and demanding. He took a step forward, But the woman didn't budge. "No one is taking him," she repeated, her voice steady. But there was something fierce in the way she spoke. She wasn't just an assassin. She was someone who knew exactly what she was doing. John's mind raced. What did these men want with him? Why was the assassin so protective of him? And why couldn't he shake the feeling that this was just the beginning? One of the men in the group raised his weapon slightly, aiming it at the woman. "We're not asking," he growled. "Get out of the way, or we'll make you." The assassin didn't react to the threat. Instead, she turned her head just slightly, enough to look at John with a quiet intensity. Her eyes were calm, but there was a hardness to them that John couldn't ignore. "Stay back," she said to him in a low voice, without breaking her gaze. "This isn't your fight." But John couldn't just stand there. He wasn't trained for this. He wasn't armed. But something inside him stirred, something that had been dormant for years. He wanted answers. He wanted to know why his life was in danger and why this alien assassin was so determined to protect him. Before he could say anything, the door to the lab slammed open, and more armed men rushed in, pushing past the first group. They were now surrounded. The woman didn't flinch. She moved with such speed that John could hardly follow her. In the blink of an eye, she was already disarming one of the men, twisting his arm behind his back with a force that made John's stomach churn. The man cried out, but she didn't stop. She was like a force of nature, her movements so precise and quick that it was almost as if she were a blur. Every man she faced was down within seconds, incapacitated without a single fatal blow. The rest of the group seemed taken aback, unsure of what to do. "Get her," the man with the scar shouted, his face twisted in anger. He raised his weapon again, but before he could fire, the assassin was already on him. With a swift kick, she knocked the gun out of his hand and flipped him to the floor. She stood over him, her eyes cold, her expression unreadable. John had never seen anything like this. The assassin wasn't just skilled. She was a master. It was clear that she was trained for moments like this, that violence and danger were second nature to her. Yet, even in the heat of the confrontation, she spared lives. She didn't kill, she only incapacitated Dot as the last man was taken down. The lab was silent except for the soft groaning of the defeated. The assassin straightened up, brushing her hands off. She didn't look at John immediately, but when she did, he saw something in her eyes, something he hadn't noticed before. "Why didn't you kill them?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She studied him for a long moment, as though deciding whether or not to answer. Finally, she spoke, her tone softer than before. "Because I didn't need to," she said simply. John frowned. "But you could have ended it." She shook her head, her expression still unreadable. "I'm not a monster," she said quietly. "I'm an assassin, yes, but I'm not a murderer." John didn't know how to respond. He didn't know if he could fully understand what she meant, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. She was more than just the killer he had first assumed her to be. "Why are you protecting me?" John asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What do you want from me?" The assassin's eyes softened for just a moment, and John could have sworn he saw something like hesitation. It was fleeting, gone before he could catch it, but it was there. "I don't want anything from you," she replied, her voice firm again. "You're not the target. I was sent to eliminate someone else. But things have changed. The people after you, they've been watching you for a long time. They know what you can do." John's mind spun. "What do you mean?" "I don't know what you're talking about." The assassin exhaled slowly, as if choosing her words carefully. "You're not ordinary, John. You've never been ordinary. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll understand why you're in danger." John swallowed hard. He felt his chest tighten as the weight of her words settled over him. What had he gotten himself into? Why had his life suddenly become a target, and who, exactly, was trying to take him down? The assassin turned away from him, her gaze shifting toward the broken door. The threat hadn't disappeared, it had only been momentarily stopped. "We need to move," she said, her voice now urgent. "There's no time to waste." John looked at her, unsure of what to do, but something inside him told him to follow her. He didn't know why she was helping him or why she had spared the lives of those men. But one thing was certain: he couldn't stay in the lab. Not anymore. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The assassin looked at him one last time before answering. Her eyes filled with something John couldn't quite place. "To safety," she said. "But you need to trust me." The streets were dark, the city lights flickering in the distance as the assassin led John through alleyways. He could barely keep up with her fast pace. His heart was still pounding from the fight in the lab, and the weight of everything that had just happened hung heavily on him. What was going on? Why was he a target? And why was this alien assassin, who could have killed him at any time, now helping him? The woman he still didn't know her name moved, with an ease and confidence that John couldn't match. She didn't look back at him as she led the way, but he could see that her eyes were scanning their surroundings constantly, her body tense, alert. She wasn't just walking. She was on guard, as if expecting another attack at any moment. John opened his mouth to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. What could he say? How could he even begin to ask the right questions when nothing made sense? He'd never been involved in anything like this, never imagined that his life would suddenly be in danger because of some unknown power he had. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally, his voice quieter than he intended. He couldn't help it, the confusion was too much. "Why protect me? Why not just finish the job?" The assassin didn't answer. Right away, she didn't even slow down. Her gaze was still scanning the surroundings, but she seemed to consider his question carefully before replying. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cold but not unkind. "I'm not here to help you, John. I'm not your friend. I'm just a soldier, and soldiers follow orders." John frowned. "Then why are you stopping yourself from killing me?" She stopped walking for a brief moment, and for the first time since they met, she turned to face him. Her eyes, as cold as they were, softened just a little. There was something almost human about the way she looked at him. "There's something different about you," she said quietly. "I can't explain it. I've never felt this way before. But I'm not going to kill you. Not yet." John felt a wave of confusion wash over him. "Not yet? What do you mean?" The assassin didn't elaborate. She turned and resumed walking, her steps long and determined. John followed, still unsure of what to think. As they turned the corner, John noticed something in the distance: a black vehicle parked near the side of the road. It was sleek, unmarked, and not something that looked like it belonged in a normal city street. The assassin glanced at it and then back at John. "We're going there. Don't speak unless I tell you to." John hesitated. The car looked like it belonged to someone dangerous, but at this point, he didn't have much of a choice. He needed answers. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice a little more forceful. "Now, to a safe place, at least for now." She didn't elaborate further, and John wasn't sure what to make of her words. It was clear that whatever was happening, it was bigger than anything he could understand. But if he was going to survive, he had to trust her, at least for now. As they approached the vehicle, the assassin's hand moved to her side, and John noticed a sleek weapon tucked into her belt. It was small but clearly lethal. She was always ready for a fight. The thought made John feel both nervous and oddly reassured. She was the only thing standing between him and certain death. When they reached the car, the assassin pressed a button on her wrist. The car's door slid open, and a soft light illuminated the interior. John hesitated for just a moment before climbing in. The inside of the car was clean and minimal, with black leather seats and advanced technology everywhere. It was nothing like the old cars John was used to. The assassin slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The car moved smoothly through the streets, and John glanced out the window, trying to make sense of everything. They were leaving the city, driving further into an industrial area he didn't recognize. "I need to know what's going on," John said after a long silence. "I need to know why I'm involved in all of this. What's so special about me?" The assassin's eyes flicked toward him, but she didn't answer right away. She seemed to weigh her options before speaking. "I can't tell you everything," she said. "Not yet. But I'll tell you this, you've been targeted because of your research. You're working on something that could change everything. John frowned, trying to piece together what she meant. My research? But I've only been working on disease cures, nothing dangerous. The assassin's lips twisted into a small, bitter smile. It's not about what you think. It's about what they think. You're not just curing diseases, John. You're unlocking something far more powerful. And they want it. They want to control it. John's heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? I don't know anything about that. I'm just a scientist. I know, she said. But they know something you don't, and now they're after you. John sat back in his seat, his mind racing. He hadn't wanted anything to do with power or control. All he wanted was to help people. But now, it seemed that his work had made him a target. He was caught in something much larger than he could ever have imagined. The car continued through the city, the streets growing emptier as they left the familiar areas behind. The assassin didn't seem to be in a hurry, but her eyes were constantly scanning, always alert. We'll be safe for now, she said as she looked at John. But you're not out of danger yet. We're just getting started. John nodded, his mind racing. This wasn't the life he had imagined for himself. But now, he had no choice. Whatever was coming next, he had to face it head on. And for better or worse, the assassin was his only chance at survival. John sat in the dark, the only light coming from the small lamp beside him. His mind was still spinning from everything the assassin had said. She hadn't given him much to work with, but what she had told him was enough to make him feel more lost than ever. His research, something he had spent years perfecting, had somehow put him in the crosshairs of forces far beyond his understanding. He glanced over at the assassin, who was sitting at the small table in the corner of the room. She was focused, her eyes scanning something on a device, but her movements were calm and precise. As always, she looked like she was ready for anything. The steady rhythm of her breathing was the only sign that she was still human, even if everything about her screamed danger. How long do you think we'll be safe here? John asked, breaking the silence. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of his concerns. The assassin didn't look up from her device. Not long, she replied. Flatly, we're running out of time. John's stomach tightened. What do you mean? They've been following me this whole time? Yes, she said, finally looking up, and it's only going to get worse. The people after you have eyes everywhere. They know exactly what you're working on, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. John swallowed hard. But I don't understand. I'm just trying to cure diseases. Why would anyone want to kill me for that? The assassin leaned forward, her eyes intense. It's not about curing diseases, John. You stumbled upon something much bigger. You're close to unlocking something that could change everything. Something they can use to control entire galaxies. John's thoughts raced. He had always been focused on helping people, on improving lives. The thought that his work could be used for such a dark purpose made his blood run cold. I never intended to do anything like that, he said, shaking his head. I just wanted to help. I know, the assassin said, her voice softening slightly. But that's the problem. They didn't want you to succeed. They wanted to keep you in the dark, to keep you working on your cures without understanding the bigger picture. But now they know you're getting too close. John's hands trembled slightly as he thought about everything he had learned in the past few months. He'd been focused on disease, on finding a way to help people live longer, healthier lives. But now he understood that what he had discovered, what he had unwittingly created, could be used as a weapon, a powerful weapon. He leaned forward, pressing his palms to his face. How do we stop them? The assassin was silent for a moment before standing up. She walked toward him, her movements slow and deliberate. We don't stop them, not by ourselves. We need to go to the source. John looked up at her, confused. The source? What does that mean? The organization that's after you. The ones who sent those men after us. We need to get to their headquarters and destroy the data they've stolen. Only then will they stop hunting you. John stood up slowly, his mind still processing what she had said. He had no idea how they could possibly get to such a well-protected place, But if there was a chance to stop this madness, he knew they had to take it. And how do we do that? He asked, his voice unsure. The assassin's eyes hardened. We'll have to infiltrate their stronghold. It won't be easy. They'll be watching every move we make. John nodded. He knew this wasn't going to be simple. The assassin had already shown him how dangerous these people were, and he couldn't even imagine how heavily guarded their base would be. But if there was even the smallest chance of stopping them, he had to try. I don't have any weapons, he said quietly. I don't know how to fight. The assassin studied him for a moment, and then, to his surprise, she smiled just a little. You don't need weapons. Not yet. You'll have me. John blinked, unsure of how to take that. I'm not much help, am I? Not yet, she said again, her smile fading. But you will be. There was a pause, and for a moment, John thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, something like trust. But it was gone so quickly that he wondered if he had imagined it. Still, the words stuck with him. I will be. The assassin turned toward the door. We leave in an hour. Get ready, John nodded. Though the feeling of dread in his stomach didn't fade. He knew this was going to be dangerous, more dangerous than anything he had ever done. But now, it wasn't just about his work. It was about his survival and the survival of everyone who could be affected by what he had. Created dot as John walked toward the small bag he had packed earlier. He glanced back at the assassin. She was already moving with purpose, checking the weapon she had brought along. He could tell that she was ready for whatever lay ahead, but something told him she wasn't just doing this for the mission. She had her own reasons. Why are you helping me? He asked, his voice softer than before. The assassin didn't look at him as she answered. Because if you fail, we all fail, and I'm not going to let that happen. John didn't understand all of her words, but for the first time since he had met her, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely alone in this after all. The plan was set. John didn't know how much of a chance they had, but the assassin had assured him they could succeed if they were careful. The organization that had been hunting him, the one that had sent those men to the lab, was headquartered in a facility located outside the city, hidden deep in a forest far from civilization. It wasn't just a building, it was a fortress, complete with armed guards and high-tech security systems. But the assassin had a plan. She had studied the layout of the facility, and while it wouldn't be easy, she was confident they could infiltrate it. John's heart raced as they approached the perimeter of the facility. The assassin's footsteps were silent as she led the way, her body moving like a shadow. John tried to keep up, but his nerves were getting the best of him. He had no experience in this type of situation. They had been traveling for hours, and the closer they got to the facility, the more tense the air became. John felt like something was watching them, but every time he glanced around, he saw nothing. Stay close, the assassin whispered as they crouched behind a large rock. There are cameras everywhere. John nodded, his breath shallow. He had always thought of himself as a scientist, a man who dealt with facts and numbers, not danger and weapons. But now, he was in the middle of a life-or-death situation, and everything he had learned in his lab seemed useless here. How do you know all this? He asked in a hushed voice. The assassin glanced at him, her eyes sharp. I've been trained. For this, it's what I do. John didn't have time to ask more. They had reached the outer wall of the facility. The assassin moved swiftly, pulling out a small device from her pocket. She pressed a few buttons, and with a soft click, the security system shut down, giving them access to the main entrance. They slipped inside quietly, moving like shadows in the dark. John's heart was pounding in his chest, but he didn't have time to think about fear. They had a job to do, and failure wasn't an option. The building was cold and sterile, the walls made of smooth metal. As they moved deeper into the facility, the lights flickered on, illuminating the long, empty hallways. It felt like they were walking through an abandoned place, but John knew better. Every corner, every door, was likely filled with guards and security. The assassin paused at a door. Listening carefully, she motioned for John to stay back and slowly crept forward. He watched as she silently opened the door, her movements fluid and precise. Inside, a small group of men was gathered around a table, talking in low voices. John could hear their words clearly, even from the hallway. Any word on the scientist? One of them asked. We need him. His research could change everything. The other man shook his head. We haven't found him yet, but we know where he's headed. We can't let him get away. The assassin's eyes narrowed. She had heard enough. With one swift movement, she entered the room, taking down the guards before they even realized what was happening. John stood frozen in the doorway, watching her in awe. She was a machine, fast, efficient, and deadly. When the last guard fell to the ground, the assassin turned to John. We need to move quickly, she said, her voice steady. They're going to know. We're here soon. John nodded, swallowing hard. He wasn't sure how much longer they could keep this up. Every step they took brought them closer to the heart of the facility, and he knew they were running out of time. They continued down the hallway, avoiding the security cameras and guards. Every time they passed a door, John couldn't help but wonder what was behind it. What kind of secrets did this place hold? And what did they want with him? Finally, they reached a large, locked door at the end of the hall. The assassin paused, her hand on the handle. This is it, she said quietly. This is where they're keeping the data. We need to destroy it. John's breath caught in his throat. The weight of the situation was sinking in. The data behind this door wasn't just about him, it was about everything he had unknowingly created. If he didn't stop them now, it would be too late. The assassin turned to him. Stay close. We don't know what's inside. She kicked the door open, and they stepped inside. The room was filled with high-tech equipment, screens flashing, with data John couldn't understand. But it wasn't the equipment that caught his eye, it was the giant screen in the center of the room. On the screen was a map of the galaxy. But the map wasn't just a map, it was an app of power. It showed the locations of every powerful organization, every military base, every research facility, and right in the center of it all was Earth. John felt his stomach drop. This wasn't just a research project, it was a plan. A plan to control everything. Before he could react, the assassin moved to the console, quickly typing in a series of commands. The screens flickered, and alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed overhead, and John knew they had triggered the facility's defenses. We need to go, the assassin said, her voice sharp. She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind them, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. They were trapped. John's heart raced as the assassin turned to face him. It's time, she said, her eyes hard. We fight. John didn't know what was coming next, but he knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. The alarms blared loudly, echoing through the metallic halls of the facility. Red lights flashed in every corner, painting the walls with an eerie glow. John's heart pounded in his chest as he followed the assassin, barely keeping up with her fast pace. The sound of heavy footsteps approached quickly, and he knew that their time was running out. We need to get to the exit, the assassin said, her voice low but urgent. She moved with purpose, her steps swift and confident. John, on the other hand, could barely catch his breath as he tried to match her speed. They rounded a corner, and the assassin motioned for him to stop. She pressed her back against the wall. Peering around the corner cautiously, John stayed close, his pulse racing. They could hear the guards now shouting commands, their boots thudding on the metal floors. Do you have a plan? John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The assassin didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were focused, scanning the hallway in front of them. We're going to have to fight our way out, she said finally, her voice calm despite the danger surrounding them. But we can't stay here long. John's mind raced. He had never been in a real fight before. How was he supposed to survive this? He wasn't trained like she was. He felt out of place, like a bystander in his own life. But the assassin was right. He couldn't just stand there. If he didn't act, he would be caught. We'll be okay, the assassin said, as though sensing his fear. Stick close, follow my lead, and keep your head down. John nodded, trying to steady his breath. He had to trust her. There was no other choice. The footsteps grew louder, closer. The assassin stepped forward, her movements fluid and silent. She was like a shadow, slipping through the hallway without a sound. John did his best to follow her, but the noise of the alarms, the flashing lights, and the rushing of his own thoughts made it hard to concentrate. They reached another corner, and the assassin stopped. John barely had time to register what was happening before she dropped to the ground, pulling him down with her. 3 armed guards appeared at the end of the hallway. They were moving quickly, their eyes scanning for any sign of movement. John's heart raced, and he instinctively held his breath. The assassin's hand was on the hilt of her weapon, but she didn't draw it yet. She was waiting for the right moment. The guards walked closer, their boots echoing against the walls. One of them stopped, just a few feet from where John and the assassin were crouched, his eyes scanning the area. John held his breath, praying they wouldn't be spotted. The assassin didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on the guard, and she waited. When the guard took a step forward, she moved. It was so fast that John barely saw her strike. One moment, the guard was standing, and the next, he was on the ground, unconscious. The other 2 guards barely had time to react before the assassin was on them. She was everywhere at once, moving with deadly precision, taking them down one by one without breaking a sweat. John watched, wide-eyed, as she fought. Her speed, her skill, it was like watching a master at work. When the last guard hit the floor, she straightened up, her expression unchanged. "We're almost there," she said. "Let's go." John, still in shock, quickly followed her as she moved past the fallen guards. They continued down the hallway, making sharp turns and avoiding more guards. John could feel the heat of the chase. He could hear their voices in the distance, the urgency in their steps, but they were always one step ahead. The exit was in sight. The large steel door loomed ahead, the last obstacle between them and freedom. But as they neared it, a figure stepped out from the shadows, a tall man with a scar running down his face. The same man who had been leading the guards at the lab. "Not so fast," the man said, his voice low and menacing. The assassin immediately stepped in front of John, her hand reaching for the weapon at her side. John could see the man's weapon, too, raised and ready. He felt a knot form in his stomach. "You're not getting out of here," the man continued, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. Not with him. John's mind raced. He had no idea how they could get out of this, but before he could react, the assassin moved again. It was so fast that John almost didn't see it. In one swift motion, she disarmed the man, her blade flashing through the air, and knocked him to the ground. The man groaned in pain but didn't fight back. The assassin stood over him, her expression cold. "You'll be alive to regret this," she said, her voice icy. Without another word, she grabbed John's arm and pulled him toward the exit. The door slid open, and they stepped into the cool night air. For a moment, everything was still. The alarms had stopped, and the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. They had made it outside, but John couldn't help but look back at the facility, knowing they had just escaped a very close call. "We're not out of the woods yet," the assassin said, pulling him away from the door. "They'll be after us soon. We need to move." John followed her, his mind still processing everything that had just happened. His legs felt like jelly, but he couldn't stop now. He had no idea where they were going or how they were going to escape. But one thing was certain: this wasn't over. The assassin led the way, always watching, always alert, and John knew that as long as he was with her, they would keep fighting.